Good morning to all of you. Today we'll start with malignant ovarian tumor. So already benign ovarian tumor was taught to you, and today we'll discuss about the malignant ovarian tumor or ovarian cancer or malignancy of ovarian disease, malignant ovarian tumor. It constitutes about 20% of genital malignancy, and 20% of ovarian neoplasms are malignant, and 80% are benign. And it's more common among nulliparous women, and it is the fourth most common cause of cancer death in women, next to that is breast, colon, and lungs, and it is the fourth most common cause of cancer deaths in women. And the malignant ovarian tumor is clinically a great challenge because the almost majority of cases, the cases are asymptomatic till late stage, and there is no cost-effective screening method for ovarian tumor for which early cases can be diagnosed, like that of cancer cervix, where the screening method diagnoses the early cancer cervix, and also the in endometrial cancer also it can be diagnosed early because there is menstrual symptoms are there like postmenopausal bleeding, for which the patient will come for checkup to the gynecologist. But here the symptoms are very vague symptoms, so the patients usually do not come to gynecologist because there is no menstrual symptoms like that of endometrial cancer. So here, all the majority of patients, 70% of cases of malignant ovarian tumor cases come in very late stage, stage 3 or stage 4 late stage or in advanced stage. So it's a great challenge for the management of malignant ovarian tumor. So what is the epidemiology? Usually, nulliparous women carry a higher risk for ovarian malignancy, and repeated ovarian trauma, ovulatory trauma due to ovulation, repeated ovulation to the ovarian epithelial lining is a promoting factor for carcinogenesis. Due to repeated ovulation, there occurs trauma to the ovarian epithelium. So it is a promoting factor for carcinogenesis. It is an important promoting factor for carcinogenesis of ovarian malignancy. And combined oral contraceptive pills or COCs reduce the risk of significantly because the mechanism of action without it there is no ovulation. So there is no trauma, repeated trauma to the ovarian epithelial lining. So it reduces the risk significantly. It is a protective factor for the development of malignant ovarian tumor. And breastfeeding, tubal ligation, and hysterectomy have been associated with reduction in the risk also. There is less risk in the development of malignant ovarian tumor when she is lactating and tubal ligation. Just I am coming. It's gone. It's gone. So other preventing factors prevention of malignant ovarian tumor is breastfeeding, tubal ligation, and hysterectomy. Then it has also genetic background. So there are hereditary, in case one case, hereditary ovarian cancer occurs in two forms. That is, number one is hereditary breast ovarian cancer syndrome, BOC. And it is usually observed in 90% of cases of all familial ovarian cancers. And there are two genes, BRCA1, CA1, that is chromosome 17q, and BRCA2, chromosome 13q gene. There occurs gene mutations are in majority of such cases, especially in case of serous cyst adenocarcinoma, but not in mucinous cyst adenocarcinoma types of malignant ovarian tumor. We'll discuss later on. And this type of hereditary cause present at an earlier age. Then what are the categories of So what are the categories of ovarian, malignant ovarian tumor? First is epithelial, that is about 80 to 85% of cases. And out of this, high-grade serous cyst adenocarcinoma 70%, mucinous cyst adenocarcinoma 10%, and endometrioid 10%, and low-grade serous cyst adenocarcinoma is 5 to 10%, and clear cell is 5%. So most commonest variety of malignant ovarian tumor is epithelial variety, epithelial malignant ovarian tumor, and out of which about 80 to 90% of epithelial tumors are serous cyst adenocarcinoma. Then other varieties or categories of malignant ovarian tumor is germ cell tumors. It may be teratoma, immature teratoma in 36% cases, dysgerminoma 33%, and endometrial sinus tumor 15%, and embryonal carcinoma 4%, choriocarcinoma 2%, gonadoblastoma and mixed germ cell also 5%. Then sex-cord stromal tumors, that is granular cell tumor, 70% cases. Then it may be thecoma, fibroma, Sartori lytic cell, gynecoblastoma. Then metastatic diseases, 5%. GI tract, gastrointestinal tract, 39%, breast, 28%, endometrium, 20%, and lymphoma. Then hereditary, 10 to 15%, that is hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome, and another is Lynch syndrome. So next is, this is the Lynch syndrome or hereditary non-polyposis colorectal cancer, HNPCC. It is another type of hereditary malignant ovarian tumor. That is, it is autosomal dominant transmission either, and women with HNPCC or otherwise known as Lynch 2 syndrome have lifetime risk of about 50% for endometrial cancer and also 12% for ovarian cancer. Due to mutations in 3 DNA mismatch repair genes, this occurs. So it is familial cancer, account for about less than 10% of all ovarian cancer. So these two are familiar or hereditary. Then what is the pathology of ovarian malignancy? So it may be primary or secondary. Primary in 80% of cases, it may be secondary. Primary, out of primary, it is epithelial, almost 80 to 90% of cases, and out of this, serous, mucinous, endometrioid, Brenner, undifferentiated, and we have already mentioned, and non-epithelial type, so germ cell, sex cord stromal, and unclassified. So mainly Malignant ovarian tumor means epithelial malignant ovarian tumor, which constitutes about 90% of malignant ovarian tumor. So next is secondary malignant ovarian tumor occurs in about 20% of cases, typical or atypical. That is Krukenberg tumor, atypical. Then what are the general considerations? So malignant epithelial tumor constitute about 90% of all primary ovarian carcinomas. Non-epithelial malignant tumors such as gonadal stromal or germ cell tumors are indeed rare. So they are rare. The most commonest is 90%. That is malignant epithelial tumors of all primary malignancies, ovarian malignancies. So primary epithelial tumor, ovarian tumor. So malignant epithelial tumors include both cystic and solid, variety, and usually bilaterality in about 50% of cases. And cystic is more common than solid, and it may be also mixed variety, complex variety. When it is cystic and solid, both types are present. It is complex variety. It is also more, it is a feature of malignancy. And endometrioid carcinoma is associated with endometrial carcinoma. Endometrial means uterus, endometrium of the uterus. So endometrial carcinoma in 20% and ovarian endometriosis in 10% of cases. So usually it is cystic. In naked eye appearance, wall of the cystic tumor becomes saggy. It may be papillary projections, excretions at places present, and on cut section there may be solid areas with hemorrhage at places, and papilla become friable. The base becomes broad and indurated, and it is filled up with gelatinous material, mucinous cystinocarcinoma. It is filled with gelatinous material. In case of serous cystinocarcinoma, the fluid is serous, like a straw colored. Then, what are the types of tumor with histological picture? So, commonest is serous cyst carcinoma. That is, histological type is, histological picture shows adenocarcinoma. Mucinous cyst carcinoma is also adenocarcinoma. Malignant dermoid is also, that is, squamous cell carcinoma. And endometrioid or adenocanthoma is adenocarcinoma. So only dermoid is mainly squamous cell carcinoma, histological picture. Then in solid variety, that is, its moderate size, external surface is smooth and often lobulated. Subserous blood vessels may be prominent because of increased vascularity, and cut section shows grayish granular appearance, at times brain-like structure, and it may be irregular cystic spaces due to necrosis, and microscopic appearance reveals adenocarcinoma or carcinoma without adenomatous pattern. Then specifically serous cyst adenocarcinoma, which is the commonest variety of epithelial malignant ovarian tumor, serous cyst adenocarcinoma. It has long papillary outgrowths, and there may be considerable cellular mitotic activity, and lace-like pattern characterized by slit-like spaces between the papilla is due to extensive coalescence of papilla. There is conglomeration or mixing of coalescence of papilla. Then most important is FIGO staging. In 2014, International Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecology staged the malignant ovarian tumor in 2014. So the staging aims at for better choice of adjuvant therapy for treatment and for better assessment of prognosis. So it is done following laparotomy, staging laparotomy, and is followed as per FICO in 1988 and revised in 2014. So there are 4 stages. Stage 1, growth limited to the ovaries, and again ABC, stage 1, ABC. A means stage 1A, means growth limited to one ovary, no ascites, no tumor on the external surface and capsule intact. Then growth limited to both ovaries, stage 1B, no ascites, no tumor on the external surfaces and capsule intact. But stage 1C, tumor either stage 1A or 1B, one or both ovaries, tumor on surface of one or both ovaries, or with capsule rupture, your capsule has ruptured, or with ascites present containing malignant cells, or with positive peritoneal washing. Then stage 2, growth involving one or both ovaries with pelvic extension. So stage 2A, here one or both ovary, stage 1, one ovary. Then stage 2A, extension and or metastasis to the uterus and or tubes. B, stage 2B, extension to other pelvic tissues. Stage C, 2C, tumor either stage 2A or 2B, but tumor on surface on one or both ovaries, or with capsules ruptured, or with ascites present containing malignant cells, or with positive peritoneal fluid. Then stage 3, tumor involving one or both ovaries with peritoneal implants outside the pelvis and are positive retroperitoneal or inguinal lymph nodes. Superficial liver metastasis equals stage 3, and tumor is limited to the true pelvis but with histologically proven malignant extension to small bowel or omentum. Stage 3A, tumor grossly limited to the true pelvis with negative nodes but histologically confirmed microscopic seeding of abdominal peritoneal surfaces. B, tumor involving one or both ovaries with histologically confirmed implants of abdominal peritoneal surfaces with non-exceeding 2 cm in diameter. Nodes are negative. Then stage 3C, abdominal implants greater than 2 cm in diameter and are positive retroperitoneal or inguinal nodes. Then stage 4, growth involving one or both ovaries with distant metastasis. If pleural effusion is present, there must be positive cytology to alert a case to stage 4. And parenchymal liver metastasis equals stage 4. Then spread. What are the modes of spread in case of malignant ovarian tumor? So first is natural pathway of spreading is spread along the peritoneal surface to involve the ovarian, parietal and intestinal peritoneal surfaces as well as the undersurface of the diaphragm, particularly on the right side. So the usual modes of spread are transcoelomic, lymphatic, direct and hematogenous. So transcoelomic, implantation of malignant cells occurs by this method. So there may be direct exfoliation of the cells as in papillary cysts of adenocarcinoma and penetration of tumor capsule and rupture of the capsule. Then multiple secondary deposits are formed on the peritoneal surfaces, especially in the pouch of Douglas, in the omentum, diaphragm, retroperitoneal nodes, and serous surfaces of the abdominopelvic organs. This is the mode of by the transcoelomic spread. Then by lymphatics, it may also spread. It is to the draining lymph nodes, namely parietic and superior gastric nodes. And pelvic nodes may be involved through peritoneal permeation into the subperitoneal lymphatics. The left supraclavicular nodes are enlarged due to obstruction of the efferent lymphatic channel of the nodes by the tumor emboli. That is due to obstruction. Then, what are the lymph node nodes? Lymph node involvement in ovarian malignancy, staging and parietic and pelvic. Stage 1 to parietic involvement 20% and pelvic 30%. And stage 3 and 4, parietic involvement is 65% and pelvic is 67%. And lateral lymphatic spread through the broad ligament to the pelvic nodes may occur also. Then there may be retrograde lymphatic spread in advanced disease to the inguinal nodes through the round ligament. Then direct spread. After the capsule is broken or ruptured, the spread occurs directly to the adjacent organs such as tubes, broad ligament, intestines, omentum, and uterus. Then by hematogenous spread, the bloodstream metastasis is late and the involved organs are lungs, liver, bones, and other structures. Blood. Then there may be ascites. That is one important feature. Ascites, what is the cause of ascites? Ascites is due to obstruction of the peritoneal fluid outflow, principally through the diaphragm, and due to increased transudation of the serum across the peritoneal surfaces. Then this secretions is mostly not from the tumor-bearing peritoneum, but from the tumor-free areas. There is more transudation from the tumor-free areas, peritoneum. So liver, the involvement of liver is usually blood-borne when the guts are also involved. Then contralateral ovary or opposite ovary is involved in majority of metastatic ovarian malignancy, and even in primary malignancy, the contralateral involvement may be due to retrograde lymphatic spread through parietic glands. Then involvement of the uterus. Usually, the body of uterus is mostly affected either due to lymphatics or through the transtuber spread. And the cervix involvement is rare. Then right-sided pleural effusion. Ascitic fluid reaches the right subdiaphragmatic space along the wider right paracardial goiter. Paracardial goiter is wider. So there occurs usually right-sided pleural effusion. Other causes are the fluid so collected can pass freely across the diaphragm. Free communication of submesothelial network of lymphatic capillaries with the corresponding plexuses on the thoracic surface of the diaphragm underlying the pleura on the right side. Alternatively, there is more presence of wide pleuroperitoneal sinuses on the right side. Why there occurs right side pleural effusion? There occurs, these are the causes, more presence of wide pleuroperitoneal sinuses on the right side and hence producing right pleural effusion. Then coming to clinical features, what is the patient profile? Usually 60% of ovarian neoplasms or malignancy occurs in postmenopausal and about 20% in premenopausal women are malignant. So more common in case of postmenopausal women, and increased association of nulliparity and with a family history. Then what are the symptoms? Early stage, usually mostly asymptomatic. That is why it's very difficult to be diagnosed at early stage, and usually the patients come at the stage of late stage, third and fourth stage. So early stage is usually asymptomatic. This is unique feature that is very difficult to diagnose at the early stage, and also management and also survival. And presenting complaints are usually of short duration and insidious in onset. It is also unrelated to the duration because it may be usually short duration, but the spread might be more. And insidious in onset. So it is not related to the duration and the time of onset. So usually, though it is usually short duration, still then, even if it is short duration, it may have advanced stage of disease and vice versa. And symptoms are not specific symptoms. So vague symptoms. So there may be feeling of abdominal distension and vague discomfort, and features of dysphagia such as flatulence and eructation, and all are due to presence of the tumor mass in the abdomen. And there may be also loss of appetite with a sense of bloating after meals. So these are all vague symptoms, not related, not specific for the ovarian cancer. So in late stage, in pre-existing tumor, there may be appearance of dull aching pain and tenderness over one area, and rapid enlargement of the tumor. There is growth, rapidly enlargement, and gradually more pronounced symptoms appear like abdominal swelling, rapid swelling of the abdomen, a rapid increase in swelling are indicating due to increased growth, and dull aching pain, sudden loss of weight, and respiratory distress due to big mass, and there may be menstrual abnormalities, especially in case of functioning ovarian tumors, granulosa cell or theca cell, or in case of big ovarian tumor also, there may be non-functioning ovarian tumors also cause menstrual abnormality. Then what are the signs? On general examination, cachexia and pallor of varying degree, jaundice may be evident in late cases, and left supraclavicular lymph node and edema of leg and vulva is characteristic of malignancy. When there is edema of leg or vulva, it indicates almost all it's a case of malignant ovarian tumor. And for abdominal examination revealed, there may be enlargement of the liver may be far and nodular, or it is involved, and mass is felt in the hypogastrium with features of the mass is ovarian tumor is present in hypogastrium region, and it may be solid or heterogeneous, and mobility may be mobile or restricted or fixed, and tenderness usually present, surfaces usually irregular, and margins well defined, but the lower pole is usually not reached because it is malignant condition, though in benign ovarian tumor, usually the lower pole is reached, but in malignant ovarian tumor, lower pole is not reached usually, as it is extended to the pelvis, and on percussion, usually done over the tumor, done on percussion. Then, for vaginal examination revealed the uterus may be separated from the mass felt for abdomen, unlike that of fibroid which is attached to the uterus. The nodules may be felt through the posterior fornix, and if it is more than 1 centimeter, and the diagnosis of malignancy is almost certain. If the nodule is more than 1 centimeter in the posterior fornix, the diagnosis is almost sure. Then what are the special investigations? So investigations to be done with the aim of to confirm malignancy preoperatively, to identify the extent of lesion, and to detect the primary site. To confirm malignancy, what are the investigations to be done? Cytologic examination for detection of malignant cells is carried out from the fluid collected by the abdominal paracentesis or cul-de-sac posterior cul-de-sac aspiration. Then tumor marker estimation, though not specific, but in epithelial ovarian carcinoma, there is no specific tumor marker, but more common tumor marker used is CA125. It is elevated more than 65 units per ml with a pelvic mass may be suggested. Normal is usually 35, but when it is more than 65, it is sure malignancy. And other tumor markers are HE4, CA19-9, CA15-3, ovarian 11. Then for identification of extent of lesion, what are investigations? So straight X-ray of chest to exclude pleural effusion and chest metastasis. Then barium enema to detect any lower bowel malignancy. Then cytologic examination of thoracocentrosis fluid. Then ultrasonography is of limited help but can be employed to detect involvement of the omentum or contralateral ovary. Then CT scan, retroperitoneal lymph node assessment and detection of metastasis, that is in liver and omentum, which helps in staging the ovarian malignancy. Then MRI is helpful to determine the nature of ovarian neoplasm and also for the retroperitoneal lymph nodes and detection of metastasis. Then PET scan can differentiate normal tissues from cancerous tissues. It is more sensitive than CT or MRI, PET scan, and usually more useful in case of recurrence cases. Then intravenous pyelography whenever required, and then examination under anesthesia sometimes required for the diagnosis and extension of the disease, and diagnostic uterine curettage is indicated when there is abnormal uterine bleeding, mostly postmenopausal bleeding or any other abnormal menstrual bleeding. Then diagnostic uterine curettage DNC should be done. Then to detect the primary site, barium X-ray, gastroscopy or colonoscopy and mammography. As you know, the primary sites may be breast or GI tract commonly. So usually these are the investigations to be done. Then diagnosis of malignant ovarian tumor is made by clinical, by ancillary aids, operative findings, and histologic confirmation, the last. So what are the clinical? So clinical diagnosis in early stage is very much deceptive because of no age specific, and although more prevalent beyond the age of 45, that is 40% of ovarian neoplasms are malignant, and no age is immune to ovarian cancer. So no age is specific, unlike that of fibroid and endometrial cancer, that the age specificity is there. But here, at any age, malignant ovarian tumor can occur, although the majority of cases occur in postmenopausal women. Persistent gastrointestinal symptoms in women over the age of 40 with a history of ovarian dysfunction, and no specific symptom in about 50% cases. It is no specific symptom. Unrelated to the duration of symptom, even with the symptoms of short duration, it may have extensive spread. Conversely, a long-standing tumor may remain benign. It is also unrelated to the size of the tumor. A big tumor may remain benign for a long time, whereas a small enlarged ovary may be found malignant. So at the time of diagnosis, about 70% of patients with epithelial carcinomas have metastasis outside the pelvis. So that is why it is a great challenge for diagnosis in early stage, and for also malignant, for also management, and the survival rate is so not increased. So because it is diagnosed late. So what are the most common sites of metastasis? Peritoneum in 85% cases, omentum 70%, contralateral ovary 70%, liver 35%, lungs 25%, and uterus 20%. Mostly the body of the uterus is involved, and cervix is rarely involved. Then what are the ancillary aids? Detection of malignant cells from the ascitic fluid collected by abdominal paracentesis or cul-de-sac aspiration is a positive proof of abdominal malignancies. When combined with presence of a pelvic mass, almost confirms ovarian malignancy. These malignant cells are detected with the presence of pelvic mass, means ovarian malignancy, malignant ovarian tumor. Then MRI or CT scan have not yet proved to be much useful in diagnosis, but it is also useful. And transvaginal ultrasonography improves the detection rate than the abdominal ultrasonography. And examination under anesthesia may be useful in doubtful cases, especially in an obese patient where it is very difficult to diagnose or to do abdominal examination for diagnosis. So UA examination anesthesia is required, and elevation of serum CA-125 beyond 35 milliinternational per ml. Then operative findings. When there is hemorrhagic fluid, it is a very much suggestive, but a clear and straw color fluid cannot rule out malignancy. Though hemorrhagic fluid is suggestive, but when there is clear straw color fluid, so malignancy not excluded. So differentiation between a benign and malignant tumor may be possible clinically with laparotomy findings and with ultrasonography criteria. All are when combined, the diagnosis is better. And the metastatic nodules on the peritoneal surfaces and omentum when there is present, then all ovarian tumors must be subjected to histopathological study because it confirms the diagnosis and also identifies a type and grade of the malignant tumor. Then management of epithelial ovarian tumor will finish preventive only. Primary prevention, genetic screening for BRCA1 and BRCA2 for women with high risk for ovarian and breast cancer, annual mammographic screening for women with a strong family history of breast cancer, and periodic screening for other malignancies, colonoscopy, endometrial biopsy for women with Lynch 2 syndrome. Then combined oral contraceptive pills as a preventive measure, chemoprophylaxis, is recommended to a woman especially belonging to Lynch type 2 families as there is no ovulation. Repeated ovulation is the one cause of malignant ovarian tumor, and another preventive measure is prophylactic oophorectomy along with hysterectomy, especially in high-risk women, is a preventive measure against ovarian malignancy. High-risk women, when there is hysterectomy is done along with prophylactic oophorectomy should be done. So to prevent metastatic or malignant ovarian tumor. Then prophylactic oophorectomy. Nulliparous women aged more than 45 years, history of ovarian, endometrial or colonic carcinoma in first degree relative mother and sister. Then grossly abnormal ovary in premenopausal group. Ovarian volume more than 20 cubic centimeter, and women who had one ovary removed or benign neoplasm, and previous history of breast carcinoma and radiation-induced menopause. So these are the indications of prophylactic oophorectomy. Then secondary prevention, that is screening. Screening aims at detecting early ovarian malignancy in asymptomatic women. So till date, there is no specific method of screening for early detection of epithelial ovarian cancer is available. But there are other, so what are the screening procedures? Clinical, regular and periodic clinical examination of the high risk group is done, and bimanual pelvic examination in an asymptomatic woman may detect an adnexal mass, and clinical examination is not very specific. Then tumor markers, the most important tumor marker in case of malignant ovarian tumor is CA125. It is a glycoprotein used for screening of epithelial cancers of the ovary, and the normal value is 35 units per ml, and is suggestive more than 35 is suggestive of epithelial ovarian cancer. It is also used for monitoring the patient during chemotherapy and for follow-up. So, though it is not a tumor-specific antigen, but it is commonly used as a tumor marker in case of epithelial malignant tumor. So what are the, because there are many conditions where there is increased CA125. Normal woman 1%, and the CA of the breast, lung, colon, and endometrium. These are the conditions where CA125 is increased. So it is not specific for the malignant epithelial tumor. Endometriosis also is increased, pelvic inflammatory disease, and peritonitis. So serum level of CA125 falls after surgical removal, and elevated level, bulky residual disease or tumor recurrence or resistant clones to chemotherapy. Serum half-life of CA125 is 20 days. So ultrasound imaging should be also done. So transvaginal color Doppler TBCT differentiates benign from malignant tumors by assessment of its vascular supply and intramural blood flow. Intratumoral blood flow. So increased neoangiogenesis in ovarian malignancy causes central neovascularity. Study of vascular parameters, pulsatility index PI less than 1 or resistance index RI less than 0.4 increases the risk of malignancy. 3D contrasts and 3D ultrasound, contrast enhanced power 3D contrast enhanced power Doppler sonography is found to be also more diagnostic. So risk of malignancy index RMI. RMI equal to U M into CA125. U equal to ultrasonography score 1 point each for multilocular cyst, solid areas, metastasis, ascites, and bilateral lesion. M equal to 3 postmenopausal women and CA125 level in units. So risk of cancer is 75% when the RMI risk of malignancy index value is more than 250. So genetic testing should be done also in case of high risk women, age group 40 to 60 years, familial cancers, breast and endometrial, ovarian, colorectal, history of removal of benign ovarian tumor or breast carcinoma, postmenopausal palpable ovary, relative or absolute infertility, dysgenetic gonad, and fertility drugs. These are the high risk women where genetic testing should be advised. So what are the protective factors for ovarian malignancy? Combined oral contraceptive, pregnancy, tubal ligation, hysterectomy, and breastfeeding or lactation. Okay, thank you. Any question, any doubt? Girish, come, over. You come. Hmm. Okay. Thank you very much. Next class, we'll start the treatment. Okay. Your class? Your class? Yes, sir. Girish has not come. He is not outside, sir. I have found also. Indian Medical Association. We email address. KHI. Hello. Finish. Actually, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. I can't give you my email address actually. It's not